Well, thank you both for being here today. I just wanted to check in since we're opening applications on Monday and kind of go through our eligibility process for organizations and our application process to see if you have any feedback. Since last year was a little bit different, we actually didn't have anybody apply just because of the pandemic. It was very different. So I think this year is a bit more of a hybrid system where we're incorporating some of the requirements that we were looking for last year into our usual application process. So I'll share my screen to the draft, and I think we'll just kind of go through the entire application process, eligibility process, and then the application questions itself, and get your feedback that way. It's all right. Matthew, anything to add? All right, share screen. All right, can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So the program overview doesn't really change. You know, I think that in the staff report that are presented in February, we mentioned providing funds between 150,000 to 200,000 again this year. The council seemed to agree to that. And then in the past, we've typically done grants in the range of $5,000 to $25,000. I think that we'll still stick to that unless you'd like to change that. But I think the council has enjoyed having that smaller number just in case there is an organization that you think warrants some form of financial assistance, but maybe not up to the level of $25,000. So I think it gives the council some good flexibility when selecting and reviewing applications and selecting applicants. Do you both agree with that or have any comments?
Well, we're thinking of a few different options here. So, So repeat that one more time, Victor.
In the past, we've provided grants between $5,000 and $25,000. And I think we still want to keep that option to give the council more flexibility when selecting applicants in case there's an applicant that, you know, might only be asking for $5,000 or in that range, or, you know, maybe they're one last applicant that the council would like to squeeze in, but they might not necessarily rise up to the level of a $25,000 grant. So I just wanted to make sure that that was all right with the two of you.
Yeah, well, yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, I want to be able to, you know, go as high as we feel is needed.
So should we not put a cap on the max amount of grants? So should we make grants available for more than 25,000? I mean, I guess last year we had $30,000 grants.
Yeah, so Victor, if I can just, so the highlighted paragraph that you have.
Oh, sorry, right here.
Due to the continued impacts, the one that's highlighted in yellow already. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. So that's a statement of, at least as far as I'm concerned, a continued context that we're dealing with. So when you're saying we're thinking of bifurcating this, I'm not sure, you know, if we continue to highlight the groups that we did last year, which pretty much covers those three bullets, right? Then I'm not sure why we're backing into smaller grants. All those grants were pretty large, actually.
Right.
So, if I may, I think we were looking forward this year, but again, you're the subcommittee that gets to help really design and drive this. But I think the thinking was that this year would be a hybrid between what we've done in the past and what we did last year. And so what Victor's done here is he's brought forward kind of the process and the criteria that we used in prior years, where we had the smaller grants and it was open to everybody. And then the big difference that we had discussed at the council meeting a few weeks ago, or a month or so ago, for this year is that focus on very specific areas of service that, and I think that these are the ones we originally talked about. I think it can be broader, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so I think that those are probably the two main questions we want to address today is do we want to limit the size of the grants, and what limit do we want to put on the types of services provided? Because I think you're right, there are certain organizations we selected last year because of the services they provide the community. I think the idea this year is there may be new nonprofits, new groups that, organizations that have pivoted during the pandemic to provide more COVID response that may have some great ideas and want to apply, even though they're not part of that group we funded last year. So hopefully that context helps a little bit.
Yeah, and Debbie, chime in here if your recollection is different, but my recollection from our council meeting deliberation on this was that we are still in the midst of a, now I would call it emergency/recovery, but all the needs of the folks who are most in need, who are vulnerable and are very concerned about food relief and rent relief and all the other pieces are still pretty much the same, if not even more so, because now we're dealing with a lot of mental health issues, all those pieces. And there's other pieces coming through the federal grant money about, rent relief and money for, landlords forgiving that accumulated rent. But we're not quite sure yet how that's going to play out, right? I mean, one, has the money trickled down? Is there a process in place where that's going to... So it feels to me like those who had the same emergency needs, last year, which is what I thought the council was generally agreeing on. The difference was the council said, I believe it was Council Member Rarback who first, said it, was also on our minds, is if more federal money is going to come into cities, which now it looks more likely than not, and it'll probably come into whatever that total amount is, it'll come into, two pieces, that we actually increase the amount of money we make available to those same groups for those same emergency services. Now, Vice Mayor Ruddock, was that your recollection?
Yes, and I specifically said, what was missing in this particular bulleted list were seniors and, Boys and Girls Club.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of need in those two groups as well. And right. I would want to fund, the existing groups robustly. Then if you want to add more on top of that and open it up for other purposes, but I agree with Robert. I mean, I don't see this as a return to normal. We're not returning to normal this year. I don't see it.
And wasn't senior co-siders part of our funding last year?
Yes.
Debbie, actually? It was, yeah. So that's what I thought. Yeah, okay. So we did have them in there last year, and actually a number of two different.
And the Boys and Girls Club as well.
And the Boys and Girls Club also in terms of youth services. So, so that was my recollection from the actual council meeting, Matthew. So there wasn't, I wasn't hearing anyone say, yeah, let's open it up to lots of other organizations. I mean, I hear what you're saying, like if other groups come up who might, be servicing these same needs in ways that are, established and different and, trusted suppliers who have programs. I mean, I'm feeling more confident about, for the purposes now of still being in this, emergency mode of recovery and post-COVID recovery, that I'm not sure how much. Yeah, so that's my thought. How much do we really want to open it up? Do we keep, if we want to have a certain amount of money, maybe, but, to staff, do we want to put all these groups through that process for small, or keep with what we've got for another year and fund them more robustly.
Well, I'd still like to have everybody submit applications because we're not quite as pressed as we were last year. But, you know, I think all the groups that we gave grants to are probably the ones that provide the most services for those categories of needs, right?
Right.
So I'm happy to open it up, but I would want us to be looking at $250,000.
Which is what we did last year.
We did 200, I think.
No, last year was 200. And so let me make sure we're talking. So you're saying go for a total amount of 250, which would keep the current level. That wouldn't be increasing the current level of funding for the current.
But you could still open it up and still require everybody to apply, right? But you'd have sufficient funds to do the job, you know.
Yeah, I just don't want to create any expectations. That, you know,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. And so I think we definitely want to build organizational capacity in our community. And I think, you know, there's going to be more funding to be able to do that so that we can see who else is out there. You know, one thing we could do is maybe, you know, wait and see what else is coming, or discuss this, postpone this discussion to our priority setting session.
One of the questions I know, or one of the statements that you made and came from that past council meeting was around the federal stimulus funds. And we know now that the city will get, you know, several $1 million at some point. And Bob and I were talking about this because the more meetings we've gone to that talk about how this is going to work, the less information we feel like we have. And so one of the recommendations I think we would have for the subcommittee to consider is that whatever we do with this program specifically this year, we at least at this point approach it from a general fund standpoint, as we've done in the past. And then as we gain a much better understanding, I would guess over the next month, of when and how we're going to get the stimulus funds. Are we going to have to prepay and then get reimbursed? You know, all of those types of questions, that could be included as part of the budget discussions, and either a second round of this program could be initiated associated with that, or, you know, an increase to the existing, you know, participating organizations. Because one, again, we don't have perfect details yet about how. We have a pretty good understanding that those funds can be used towards these type of efforts, but when and how, you know, the mechanisms are in place and when we're going to get the money is still in question.
Okay,
And it probably is worth a bigger discussion when we know the exact number about how we're going to use all the funds, as opposed to kind of doing it one thing at a time, if that makes sense.
That's helpful. I agree. And then, so Jackie Spears' office, Brian Perkins,
yes, yeah.
an email yesterday too about other grant programs that might be helpful for our local organizations.
Well, Debbie and I are we are on that same wavelength, because actually I've been digging into the details of that Word document, and I don't know if you saw that, Matthew. Have you seen that? Okay, so. We have some pretty tight deadlines to start digging into that money. And there seems to be, with help from Perkins' office, so claimed, but that's a separate discussion which we need to have in the next 24 hours, actually. But yeah, there is some other money coming in. So if we, let's say,
excuse me.
Bless you. So I guess what I would propose at this point then, to, you know, if we're going to go with that 250 amount, we stick with the current funding of the groups that we already have at the current level, add 50,000, and maybe make those, between 5 and, I wouldn't say 25,000 because that wouldn't leave much, either make them all $5,000 grants or between 5 and 10,000. I know in the past we've done smaller grants. I'm just not I'd rather keep them grants that, might make some difference. So probably either all $5,000 grants or between, we can say between 5 and 7 because we might not get. Let me just think about this for a second. What makes more sense? Yeah, it could be between 5 and 10,000 grants or all $5,000 grants. We can always increase the amount of money asked for, but that we can actually give. But in terms of making it meaningful for anyone to even apply, I can't see it being less than 5,000.
Yeah, you could have like one group of grants that are large grants, and then you could have a smaller pot, like 10 $5,000 grants or something like that. So just break up the total into categories.
But right now we're only talking about an extra 50,000 in addition to the grants that we're keeping the grants that we did last year at the same level for those bulleted points for the COVID-related services. And then we're adding another 50,000 from which we might make these other smaller grants, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can increase to 250 without a conversation with the whole council, because we set that 200,000 number, at a council meeting.
Well, for operational purposes, we'll bring back your recommendation to the council for approval, and the timing of this is so that any increase or any funding can be included in the recommended budget. So I think it's very appropriate, kind of the discussion you're having in the process that we're putting forward. Hey, Victor, one thing that might be easy, and it looks like you've got something to share as well, is do you have handy the agencies that were funded last year and the amounts they were funded at?
Yeah, I can pull that up. But one thing I was going to bring up first is with the discussion of, what the floor is going to be and how, how much we're going to fund and all that, and the discussion of, potential federal funding coming in. Do we need to have all that set necessarily to open up the application? If it's going to be open for 6 weeks, I think that we can set the parameters for the types of organizations that can apply based off of, priorities from the city council priorities and strategic elements, and then based off of these parameters that we've set. And then I think that we'll have a clearer picture of funding from the federal level, or maybe have a better discussion when we start reviewing the applications. And so at that point, I think that we can really get into the meat of exactly how much, maybe, depending on who's applied, the amounts and everything specifically.
So again, to set proper expectations, I don't want the people reapplying who are already going to be splitting up that 200,000 that you'll have from last year's, okay? So that's one thing we want to take care of. I would say that, we go back to council, say we have another 50,000 for now, and just make a determination. It could be between 2,500 and 5,000. I'd rather just keep them $5,000 grants, actually. And with the understanding that we might, if we do get this extra funding coming in, we may increase that amount of funding. And then we'll figure that out. We'll get some interesting proposals, so we might increase for some of those, and we'll have a better sense of what the other organizations getting the 200,000, where they are right now, and whether they're getting extra money from other grants and stuff, because we'll look at their budgets and see what their needs are, and we can always.
I'd like to just throw something out for discussion purposes. So again, I think it's okay to ask everybody to apply. I think we want to do that, and get people to explain their programs and their services and what they intend to fund. So before it was just, we're going to write you a check and take care of your COVID-related issues. One alternative is we have everybody apply, and then we have $200,000 available for large grants of between, $25,000 and $50,000, something like that. And then we have a category of small grants. So we have large grants, $200,000 for large grants, set an amount, a range, and $50,000 for 10 small grants. Minimum 2,500 or 5,000.
So,
and here's the list from last year. So last year, ALS received $50,000 for 2 different programs. That was $30K for the basic needs crisis fund, and then I think it was $20,000 for the mental health clinic. COSAT Hope received $30,000. Senior COSATers $30,000. Scroll.
Fun and Grace was on that list for 30,000.
Yeah. And then Senior COSATers 30,000. Boys and Girls Club 25. Sonrisa Mental Health 20,000, and COSAT Italy Health Center had the smallest grant at 15,000. So that was just last year. And what I'm hearing is, what I heard from Mayor Brownstone was we keep these organizations and then add on $50K with other new organizations. But Mayor Ruddick, or Vice Mayor Ruddick, what I heard from you was we still have them reapply and then keep them for the large grants and then have the $50K for smaller grants. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we could still give everybody the same they got last year, but at least we're opening it up, to be fair, and saying large grant program, $200,000, minimum grant size, the floor is $20,000. And then we could maybe give some, a couple of large ones out of that. I'm trying to, achieve your goal of opening it up and giving fair consideration with 2 categories of funding. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out for discussion. I'm happy to stick with Roberts or whatever. So.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about having a subcommittee like this is we can brainstorm a little bit and have those discussions. Yeah, so I see those as 2 separate options. One is more simplified, fixed, continue what we've been doing, add another 50,000 for smaller grants to open it up for additional folks. A second option is the 2 categories of 200,000 and 50,000. The 200,000 is for the larger grants, minimum of $20,000 grants, and then a second category for 50,000. I would say with option 1, we could still require each of those organizations that got funding last year that if we push funding forward, still submit a plan for that money, which would be a change from last year. Last year, we literally said, look, here's some funding. You tell us how you're using it and stay accountable.
I was going to call it a status, requiring a status report from those organizations. But again, I just want a very clear understanding that there is a clear preference for those groups.
Yeah.
At those funding levels, we'd like to see a status report, how the money's been spent, where they see the continued or increased need, et cetera. And yeah, so that's why, it's basically saying we're really leaning towards those same amounts of funding and then adding another 50,000 to the open grant process for now. But also be clear, it's worth applying and putting some effort into this, because if we get more money in, we can, double down on some of those grants of the 50, getting the 50, however we decide to break up that 50,000. Right. So
the real grant program then is basically, the solicitation is just for the small grants.
Yeah. And what kind of constraints would you like to put around it other than the amounts? Do you want to still focus it on COVID recovery and community recovery and in response to COVID?
For the 50,000?
For the 50,000.
I would maybe open it up so that we can see what's out there. Because if we have more money coming, we want to know, we want to have an idea of what some needs are. So I would actually open it up, but I would still constrain it, like we're not going to fund, programs that should be funded by the schools, for instance. We're not going to fund in-school programs.
I would like to open it up as well. I'd like the 6 weeks to start after we set our priorities, because that's happening next week. I mean, that's quick enough. So people can align within those priorities, and get a sense of how we describe those priorities. And which will cover a lot. I mean, those priorities will cover lots of interesting things that people, especially the economic recovery piece covers so many things. But yeah, does that sound good to you, David?
Yeah, and I would, allowable projects would include capacity building. If somebody needs, to develop their organization, they might need support that way. We don't want to pay recurring salaries, but, there's equipment. Capacity building will benefit us, I think. So.
Right. And we always indicate, there's a difference between seed money to start something totally new versus what Debbie's talking about is building capacity for an existing initiative or program that's already beginning to show some results. And that's how all grants generally work. I mean, there's always much more of a priority to leveraging existing.
I'd like to sort of put an umbrella over it of resilience. How are you helping our community become, healthier, more capable, that sort of thing. I like the idea of, safer, because that's a goal right now with climate change, with COVID. We want to fund organizations that are, doing sort of what I call resilience, food security. So not like fun stuff that might be funded through Parks and Rec, but actually, community building sorts of things.
Okay. And, one of the things we did 2 years ago to help with this process is it was open. The applications were open, but we certainly prioritized in our scoring of those applications and evaluation of those applications, certain priorities. We can do the same thing. We can, it was weighted scoring. So
I was just going to say, we'll give weight to those that make the most sense.
Yeah. So the things I'm hearing are city selected priorities, which will be selected next week, should be, higher weighted, COVID response and recovery, and then just general community resiliency, which can include a variety of things, and we can better define that as we prepare the application process.
Yeah, and I would like to include within that, diversity, inclusion, community outreach. I consider those, a key part of resilience is.
And we could put that under. Yeah.
Are typically
could be under equity model.
Yeah.
And again, that's where and again, it's good to do that also because some of the money we are talking about under, what is coming through Jackie Spear's office, the more something, is equity oriented, like access to internet, all those issues.
Yeah.
There's a small window open. It's going to be open for the next year. And we have to apply for some of that stuff by April 1st. Mm-hmm. And so I was going to tell you that, Matthew, if we got on early. But yeah, we should set up another meeting, possibly tomorrow, to talk about, we might need some grant writing help with some of that to get more of that money in, which can then further grant this if we need to contract a little bit with that. So anyway, we're building a lot of planes. We're flying a lot of planes here while we're still building them. And, but, there's some shiny coins at the end of that. So we might all have to stay up to, whatever it takes. I'm planning on putting a lot of extra hours looking through this stuff. So I think it's a great opportunity, and we can get some. The best part about that email was it said Brian's office, if any way we can help, please let us know. So I just want to be able to say, yeah. Either give us the name of some great grant people along these lines, or whatever the hell we could use so we could get going on it. Great. Okay, so do we have enough direction so far? Where do we need more direction at this point?
Here's what I would recommend. I think that based on what we've heard, we're in a much better position to put together a program for you to review. But because you are a Brown Act subcommittee, we will need to meet again for you to review that. And so I would recommend that we actually reconvene this group in like 2 weeks. And by then we'll be through the priority setting process. We'll have a discussion about these other funding sources. And then Victor and I can work on really developing a program now that you can look at, make some final fine tuning to, and then say, this is what we're recommending to the full council. And that will allow Victor then to get rolling with the application process.
If we did that, do you think we'd have enough time to bring it forward to the full council by April 6th session? Or I'm trying to remember everything else that was on there, but
I think we'd probably be shooting for the second meeting in April with the council.
20th. Okay. Sounds good.
So we'd be shifting the application process back by about a month or so. Apply applications in April and then reviewing towards the end of May, and selecting before the first or second city council meeting in June. Correct? Yeah. I
think so. What do you think, Victor? Do you think that's too pressed? We've done this enough times. You have a good handle of kind of the flow of this. Is doing a little.
How much was our current grant money? Basically, I'm trying to just refresh my memory. What was the time period that this money was intended to be spent through? At the end of?
In a fiscal year, end of June, yeah.
At the end of June. Mm-hmm. So it would be great if we can I'd love a timeline where some of this money could start flowing as close to the end of June as possible. I could think of particular groups that are already, could probably use that money.
Well, any new funding would have to be dispersed after the first of the new fiscal year, right, Matthew?
Anyway, right, mm-hmm. Right. So the more we could start getting.
The goal would be to get contracts in place and run with this July 1st.
So you figure we could still do that based on this new timeline?
I think so. Yeah, I think that we'll just we'll be moving a lot quicker, but we can preset meetings and just have it all ready to go. So we're ready to meet. We'll review those applications, and I think especially if we're not really thoroughly reviewing all those applications for the 7 current grantees that are getting the big grants, and it's much easier when we're just reviewing less applications for smaller grants.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the reason I was asking about the next meeting is because we do have 3 weeks this time before the next meeting on April 6th. So why don't you think about that? I mean, I'd be happy to call a 1-hour only special meeting to get this going quicker. So,
sorry, I'm pulling up my calendar to look at that because I had forgotten that we have that 5th Tuesday this month. I will say that given we need to put together, I just want to be really realistic here.
Yeah, no.
And given the amount of energy it is going to take to put together a program after next week's priority setting meeting.
Right, that too.
And I think publication timelines for council meetings, I think the 6th is probably too pressed.
Okay, so we'll schedule it for the 20th, and if by chance we get a whole bunch of, things get done quickly, we could do a special meeting quicker.
Yeah. And we'll do everything we can to push for the 6th, but I just want to be realistic as we're talking about the timeline.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay. Especially if we need to get some other deadlines in by April 1st, now that I think about it. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for focusing my time and thinking on that. Great. Okay. So anything else?
One more thing I thought would be helpful to review, just as we start working more on this, was the actual application itself, to see if there were any, 2 years ago, I think when I met with subcommittee, and I remember, I think Vice Mayor Reddick, you were on it, and I remember Mayor Brownson, you were on it, or maybe it was.
I think we were both on it last year, actually, as well.
Yeah, or 2 years ago.
Harvey and I then.
It was Harvey, yeah, that's right. So these are the questions from the actual application itself. So, typical demographic information is collected, a requested funding amount. If they've received any previous funding, they state that. And then these are all narrative questions where they can just go in and, write a little bit about their project and program, their own assessment of need, their own timeline, program evaluations, setting and achieving goals, and how they can problem solve and are being innovative as an organization, ways of collaborating with other organizations or agencies, a statement on their impact of funding to the beneficiaries, their actual project beneficiaries, and the quantifiable measurements they have, ways they're leveraging funds. So, funds that they receive from the city, how they're leveraging that to receive more funds from other places, one city council priorities, and then the last couple of ones are just a bit more, demographic stuff with the budget, stuff like that. So I just wanted to see if there were any tweaks that you all wanted to make to the actual application itself when we go through it, shorten it.
Well, one tweak
I say make it easy for people.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a little daunting, and in normal times, probably okay, because you're wanting to be accountable for your money, making sure people, have the wherewithal and stuff like that. But I would try to find a way to compress that somehow. There's always the issue of nonprofits, not-for-profits. We want to make sure it's not just some fly-by-night thing,
Well,
and maybe there's a way to figure that out without an onerous, application. But I don't want to discourage people unnecessarily, because we want to see what the need is out there, and we want that information. That's valuable. So why put barriers to getting that information? It's just kind of where I'm coming from.
Especially since we're talking about the smaller grants with this portion of the process anyways. Okay.
So the only last question I have then on it, do we or do not limit applicants to existing programs, which goes to more towards increasing capacity of something that's already existing, which could include programs that have been a bit put on hold because of COVID, simply because they can't bring people in person. You know what I mean? Whatever. There's so much things you can do on Zoom for some programs, but pretty much existing programs versus, for now anyway, totally brand new programs.
I would open it up.
I beg your pardon?
I would open it up. I would
just
say,
open it up to everything?
Do you have some good ideas?
Okay, then we'll, on the innovation side, then good. Okay, we'll open it up. I think staff will have a pretty good idea of which programs are just kind of.
Yeah. Thinking about how this conversation has gone, I am wondering, though, if we even need to reconvene as a subcommittee, or if you feel like you're comfortable enough with the direction you've given. I think Victor and I, he's nodding his head, are comfortable enough with what we've heard that we could bring something forward to the council that would really match what you've described today, and that would speed up the process, get us before the full council more quickly and get this moving forward. Are you comfortable with that as a subcommittee?
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm all right with that.
Go for it.
Victor, are you comfortable with that?
I am. So with that, are you thinking of April 6th then?
Yeah, I think we make sure we're ready for April 6th. We get this lined up and take it to the full council. It may take a little bit of tweaking at that meeting or after the meeting, but the more we talk, the more clear I am on what your direction is.
Right. Do we, as part of this, see if there's any questions from the attendees? Yes, right?
Yes, we should take public comment.
Good. I thought there was. Didn't want to close anything yet.
Okay. At this time, I don't see anybody raising their hand. Now would be the time. We'll give our three attendees a moment if they'd like to raise their hand if they have a question or a comment. Okay, we've got a couple of comments. First up will be Sandra Winter. Sandy, you're on the air.
Hi, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the city so much for the support that we've received from you in the past, and to say that it really has been invaluable to help us continue to do the services, but also something that I feel is even more important is the growing relationship and the incredibly positive relationship that we have with the city staff, who have just been so exemplary over this time. And so I just wanted to shout out to Matthew and all of his team. Thank you for the money, but even more, thank you for the relationships and the working together. Thank you.
Feelings are mutual, Sandy, in terms of your leadership. Senior co-signers, and the incredible amount of services you've provided to seniors here on the coast side, life-saving services. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, our next public speaker is Corinne Boot. And please, when you come on, tell me how to pronounce your name, because I always get it wrong. Corinne Butcher, you're on the air.
Hi, it's Corinne Bucher. Buchach. It's German.
I will get it right from now on, I promise.
I wanted to say thank you, just like Sandy, very grateful. And I just feel inspired, because one of the things I've been working on, I just actually sent a quick email to Debbie, is collaboration and looking at this community as a whole and how we can get back to thriving, but do it in a new way. So I will be filling out a grant application. So I'm glad to hear that you're open to some other ideas. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. That's our final public comment.
Great. Okay. If there's nothing else, I think we could adjourn this meeting of our subcommittee. Thank you, Matthew and Victor, for all the work you're coordinating around this today.
Yes, thanks. I think you guys do a great job. Really, I'm very appreciative.
Thanks to both of you. Yeah, saw the fly.
It's going to be mean.
Yeah.
Matthew, do you have a minute to talk?
Yeah, I'll call you. We don't want to do it on this feed because this is our actual feed.
Yeah, so I was going to say, great, just wanted to
Okay, I'll give you a call.
Great.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
and
everyone.
we'll bring everything forward April 6th.
All right, take care. See you.
All right. Yeah.